can't done. But everybody know, ain't no place like home. Me no know about you, but me love sink it's bad. Me no know what them a talk about. When them say sink it's mad. When everywhere in the world have problems, everywhere need God. Tell them easy no man. From your love sink it's bad. Me no know about you, but me love sink it's bad. Me no know what them a talk about. When them say sink it's mad. When everywhere in the world have problems, everywhere need God. Tell them easy no man. From your love sink it's bad.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. You're in tune to Win FM 98.9. That's on your radio dial. It's Friday again. Can't believe it's Friday. I mean, it's getting faster and faster and faster. I feel like I was just here 2 days ago, but time has gone. It's another Friday. School has reopened. So many things have happened in St. Kitts and Nevis. We are getting slowly back into normalcy. COVID-19 seeming like something of the past. Let's hope we are doing great here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So it doesn't feel as though that we are as bogged down, we feel like normal again, but we're still aware of the fact that COVID-19 is a reality and we still have to practice hand sanitizing, wearing your face mask, social distancing. But it becomes like the norm now because we have done that for such a long time. And I must say, I would want to say kudos to the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis who have continued to be aware of the fact that COVID-19 is a reality and that we have to make sure that practices make perfect. School has just reopened. We have to get our children into doing the same thing, remembering to wear your mask, remembering to sanitize because the borders are getting ready to open. And so therefore it is very, very imperative that we make sure that we practice these protocols so that when the time comes and we are open and the virus would find its way, some hope it doesn't, but find its way back onto our islands, that we are in the habit of practicing, so it becomes like normal. My name is Sandra and I'm the host for Your Views. Your Views is a program that is hosted on Win FM every Friday morning at 10 o'clock. Thanks to Island T, who's always infringing on my time. We are a bit late, but it's okay. It's all good. Their program is informative, and I suppose it can be very exciting. So it's all good. But we want to make sure that we do the things that we are supposed to do. And like I said, Your Views is a program that we try to make sure that the information comes through and areas keep you up to date on the things that are happening in and around us, St. Kitts and Nevis and diaspora and wherever it is, and that affects us. And so that is one of the reasons why the program is hosted around this time. It's a program that you can call in based on who we're having and based on the information that we're giving and whether or not we want to have interactions. We would open our lines and you can call in and you can give some ideas. The ideas can go a very, very long way. It's not a voices program where people can talk about every and anything. We talk about the topic that we're discussing and see whether or not information can come through so that whoever the powers may be can use some of our ideas that we bring through and can help us to alleviate some of the hardships of COVID-19. With me, I have an intellectual mind. It is, he is an economist. He is an advisor to the Ministry of Finance. We know that one of our situations, one of the biggest problems that we're having is not that COVID not just affect all the health of the nation, but it also affects the wealth of the nation. And so therefore, we want to know where we are as a people, what we can do. And like I said, when you have minds like Howie Richardson, you feel very, very much secured because ideas are there, implementation, they know how, they understand strategies that they can use. I am so proud, I feel so secured, and especially when I have discussions with him and I understand the information that they have and the fact that they're very much aware of the complications that COVID has brought to other shores and the stringent measures that the government would have put in place to make sure that we are not as affected as some of the other countries. And so I'm rambling on and on, and I can go on and on. Howie, good morning and welcome to Your Views.
Yes, good morning, Sandra, and thanks for having me again. I appreciate the discussions with you. I think we advance the cause of information sharing, and so I really appreciate your call up. for my attending this program.
And I am always so grateful when you say yes, because, like I said, it's information that is absolutely necessary.
Yes.
It's scary. It's a scary time for some people. People are out of jobs. They still have to live on the government stimulus package. It is difficult times right now, and we don't know how much longer it's going to go, and that is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because we don't know how much longer we're going to feel the effects of COVID. We don't know how much longer the country would have to stay in this state of always of high alert. In the likely event that the virus should come to our shores, we have to go back to that same procedures that we had before of locking down, making sure that we have that curfew back in again, and push us back into that kind of mode where, you have to prevention and is better. That kind of preventative mode that we were in, that people were complaining about. You're the economist. The government has invested $120 million as a stimulus package. How far has that gone? Have we utilized all of it? Are you aware of that? And or how much further we can, what else? Have the government have to pump any more money into the economy, or we're still riding on the $120 million stimulus package?
Okay, yeah, Sandra, the stimulus package was a well thought out package. Mm-hmm. It basically conforms to what economic theory tells you that you should basically do when you're in a crisis. Mm-hmm. So it's textbook, but it's modified to suit our local circumstance. But it is grounded in very strong economic policy. Now, the matter of how long it can continue, Sandra, it's all up to how much finances that we have available. As you would be aware, there's not an endless stream of money. It's going to dry up at some time. Mm-hmm. Now, I am not talking on behalf, I should have said that in the beginning. I am not here as a government advisor.
No,
I'm here as an economist. I cannot tell you any information in terms of how much money is there in the kitty, how much money has been allocated
to where
to
specific areas.
To specific areas in mm-hmm. terms of with that 120, how much that $120 million has left in terms of distribution. Mm-hmm. I would think that in the budget address this year, and you have to remember, Sandra, that it's an ongoing package. It has been put out, then it has been extended, and so circumstances come into play in terms of how the squeeze is going in terms of unemployment. And as you will recall, there was a matter that the government was indicating that people who were on the payroll for the assistance, if they have gotten back into their jobs, they should basically not claim for any more benefits. So it's a very buoyant situation where they're looking at it at an incremental stage. Like this month they would look at it, and the next month they would look at it and see where the money is to fund what is left in terms of the unemployment persons who are on the unemployed. So it's very fluid. But I think in terms of the accounting, in terms of what was spent and issues relating to where the funds came from, I think that you would recognize that some came from Social Security, some came from the citizenship by investment, because that was the anchor for the surpluses, a big anchor. And so we also have to look at where the citizenship by investment program is going, because that was a key in terms of providing that buffer
support.
That support.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to look at what would be interesting at the budget would be how the citizenship by investment program can, if possible, funds any more of the stimulus, like the buffer, create that buffer. So it's a fluid situation. I would say to this that the government has taken a careful look at this COVID situation, and they have made all the right moves. I cannot fault the government for anything in terms of the stimulus package. But as I said before, it's finances. We can't continue. So the economy is driven by demand, Sandra.
Yeah.
Right. The economy is driven by demand, and to the extent that people are unemployed, you're definitely going to have a fall in GDP.
But let me ask you a question, something, Howie. The private sectors, the employers, we are seeing a fall. We understand the hotel industry. We understand that because of the fact that tourists not coming in, they would be affected. But then you have the private sectors here who are not heavily dependent on the hotel industry. They are driven basically based on what the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, what they consume, like TDC and Horsford. But yet still, we are seeing a lot of those employees are being affected. I think people are using the COVID-19 as an excuse. I mean, it's going out on a limb here, and I don't want to compromise your situation. But I see some people are now working on an hourly basis. Some people are working. Some people are laid off. These are people who are not in the hospitality industry. And again, we talk about managing your finances. We talk about government practicing fiscal prudency. But let's look at the local industries that we have here, the local companies that we have here. These are people who have worked for you over the years, who you could have boasted profits year and year out and year out. And then all of a sudden, in 3 to 6 months, we have a situation and people have to be laid off. Government has to take up. You see where the burden is on the government. People who work in the private sector, the burden is on the government, because taking into consideration that when you're severed or you claim severance, government has to pay that. It comes from monies, of course, that is deducted, but these are monies that are invested otherwise. Government still have to take on that brunt. So if 1,000 people are severed, government still has to take on the brunt. We have to start looking at what is the private sector. How can they contribute to making sure that they hold on to some of their staff, but they're cutting, and a lot of them are not as affected as they claim to be.
Okay, Sandra. The issue here, Sandra, is you have to look at what the private sector is. The private sector, on a whole, is basically a trading company. They buy from overseas, they bring it in, they mark up, and they sell. Right? Now, the issue here is when there's a downturn in the economy in terms of unemployment, people are not going to buy as much as they bought before, right? So therefore, you're going to have a situation where they cannot engage in the normal fluid trading operations. And so if people don't have money to spend, it's going to hit them immediately. So they're going to see a shortfall in their sales, and then sales, you have to use your sales, your profits, and so minus expenditures to support your company. I mean, private sector is based on the capitalist system where you buy and sell in terms of what we're seeing into the local retail wholesale sector. You buy and sell expenses, you pay out your workers. Now, if anything is affecting your revenues, then it's going to affect your payouts, right? And in your business, as you recognize, salaries is one of the biggest components of your expenses. So therefore, if you seeing that your revenue is falling, you have to make some adjustments to your expenditures. And I don't fault the private sector for that, because there is a profit motive. It's a profit. You have to look at it.
I do understand that.
You have to look at it in this way, Sandra. They are driven by profits. and anything that affects their profits, they're gonna start to make some steps so that they could maintain some level of profitability. And when it comes to staffing now, they would take a look at the staffing. Because as you're aware, Sandra, if you have ever gone and spoken to a customs officer, they would tell you that they don't have much to do up by the port, because that is the extent of the shortfall, the downturn in imports. So the customs officers there, they're sitting down. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're not doing any work, but it's very slow, right? And you could see the data in terms of imports reflect that downturn, right? In terms of the firms ordering and selling.
School is opening.
Yes.
We have, and I think it is like that. If you look at the trends that is set, there's a certain time of year when you have certain hype, certain areas that are hyped, and certain areas that are you have a slow trend trekking there. School is opening, so the school uniforms, the school books, the school pencil, the school stuff, school supplies on a high. They're in demand, and they would, you have that. When you look at in TDC, let's look at TDC for example. The home and building depot is always one of the biggest areas. Construction is on a high right now. I mean, everywhere you go, somebody's constructing something. So construction is on a high. So the building materials are selling. The only area that I think they are affected by is the tours and airline offices. But otherwise than that, and if you understand the structure of those, they are trading companies. So you have one area might be down and the other one that is up. Insurance is still high. The majority, 85% of their businesses are still vibrant. They're still working as per usual. And I'm saying it's hard times for staff, for people, individuals on the whole. And I believe these companies can do better, Howie. And I understand you're talking about profit, but you have to understand service. These people there are people who would have given you yeoman service over the years. I mean, it's like they go in and they work, and then as soon as something happens, what do? Let government look after you. The private sectors can do better.
Well, Sandra, that is a very solid point. It sees to the welfare of your workers, and economics does not exclude welfare. Yes, it includes the welfare. In fact, most of the policies have a welfare appendage to them in terms of making sure that what you do, you take care of the welfare of your workers. My problem is that, Sandra, we need to delve deeper into their finances. I understand what you're saying, but the argument that you're making would be supported if we could see some data.
Yeah, and it's based on we're basing an assumption here. Yeah,
data. But at the same time, I mean, if your workers helped to get you to where you are, in terms of your profitability, then you must
in times like these,
yeah, there's some sort of helping hand to those persons who have gotten you there should be extended. Yeah, so I agree with you.
Yeah, we look at the situation now and you see it. Government, the wealth of the nation is the government's responsibilities. And so you're seeing now that you have people, Social Security has been a very big player in this the stimulus package, where they try to assist people who are working for on a certain amount. They try to boost it up to $1,000. So you have people now having to work to manage $1,000. Government has gone to the point where they would have, utilities they would have cut back on. They have given certain other benefits that to try to alleviate some of the hardships of people. And people have to understand that government itself depends on the source of income. Yes. Their source of income has been highly affected. So that is one of the questions I ask. From an economic standpoint, from an economist's point of view, how much longer do you think based on the assistance that government is giving, how much longer you think the government, not having an understanding, but you as an economist, you have an understanding where the source of funds would come from, the areas that government has been affected by. You talk about customs officers, you have recognized that there are less imports, so the government is not going to get much taxes from there, because it's about taxation. It's about taxes. If you can't depend on if the tourism industry is on it, then government has to find some other source of income. It means either taxing people, or you can't say cutting back, because government now has to take on the brunt of making sure that everybody is comforted in the times like these. So from an economist's point of view, how much longer do you think this government or any government can continue to carry that workload? We've seen Nevis crying out because they have issues. They are heavily dependent on tourism and that movement of people in and out, because that's what government depends on. How much longer can our government depend on sorry, how much longer can the government help assist all people who are affected by COVID-19?
Okay, Sandra, the from an economic standpoint, Sandra, the economy is driven by demand. Demand by the consumer for consumption-related items. The private sector, it needs to get resources that they could build out their operations. They need credit. And the government itself needs taxes. Now, the issue here is, we know that at some point we're going to run into a deficit. Deficit is as we see it now, there's a mismatch now between your revenues and your expenditures, right? And as you said, there are options available, including taxation. But one big thing that, from an economic standpoint, what we need growth.
Growth, definitely.
We need growth. When you have the growth, the taxation and those other issues, take the back burner, because you can in fact grow. And then when that growth comes in, it mitigates against any increases in taxes. So we need the growth. Now, as you're aware, the government is moving towards opening up the economy. And you could see that is created by the need to get that growth going. So we need to get back where we were before, when we achieved all of these surpluses. But it's going to take time, because you shut down for a very long time. So you're going to take a time before confidence builds back into the economy. So the question is, I know I'm going around the bush.
No, you're doing well.
I'm going around the bush.
You're doing well.
I'm going around the bush.
Yeah.
The matter has to be looked at on getting back the economy to the level where some sense of normalcy to achieve that growth, right? And so you would have seen that before, the manufacturing sector was a sector that was fairly up and running early. The government has put their infrastructure in the front. So therefore, you have that kind of construction activity. You're seeing some investor confidence in the private sector happening, because TDC now, as you recognize, is starting a new housing development, right? So the confidence is coming back. So when you have the private sector investing, the government spending on infrastructure, the tourism sector is a bit shaky, but the other sectors are moving forward. So we are seeing some sort of growth, but remember that we're coming now from a negative growth, because the economists would have indicated that we're going to see negative growth. But is the quantum of the negative growth that is the big issue. So when you're now trying now to look at growth, you do all you can in terms of making sure the economy grows. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a financial bill. then is where you're going to have to look at some of the issues in maybe taxation and these other things. But it's a little bit too early to call in terms of what is going to happen, in terms of how we're going to get moving forward. As I said before, the critical thing that we need to look at is the budget for the end of the year, because then they would take into account all of these things, where the economy is now, what policies they would need to shift the economy to get that revenue stream back on track, and see where they could make some discrete steps to sort of find that balance between still keeping the economy growing, but having a source of income. So we have to look at it at the end of the year. I mean, it's fluid, and I think at the end of the year we get a better picture in terms of how we can move forward with this COVID-19.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Howie. We want to open the borders. We realize that the world is in crisis. We see America is having some issues themselves. Everybody has a problem with financing. Who are we opening up our borders to? Who we intend to come to St. Kitts and Nevis? The tourism industry is seriously affected because tourists are people who save. We know that they save. They're not rich people who come up on a cruise all the time or who would want to go on a long-term vacation. But people and we're going into the winter season, and people have been, the areas that we open up, we encourage tourists, the destinations that we depend heavily on, we use those terms, the destinations that we depend heavily, they have been heavily affected by COVID-19. So who are we opening our borders to? Okay.
I think, Sandra, that I think you have to take a look at it as a long-term problem. The opening of the borders in the short term is not going to get that tourism sector to that level that it was pre-COVID right away. So what you do is take steps to open the tourism sector up incrementally, but at the same time, we have to see that there might be a problem in terms of the initial opening, because as you would recognize, we have a 14-day quarantine, right?
People don't even have 14-day vacation. So you come from vacation for 14 days and you're quarantined?
You're quarantined for your whole vacation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have certain people that would have come for longer term stays. Suppose you were out there, Sandra, and you got caught up in the COVID in the States, and you have property in St. Kitts that you want to come and spend a little time making sure that your properties are okay. You have persons in Europe, in England, who normally come for long-term stays. They have roots here, and they would take an extended holiday. So you're going to catch some people, notwithstanding you have a 14-day. Right? The issue now becomes when you move further on in terms of your mitigation, in terms of opening the borders, because you're going to have people now demanding, I wouldn't say demanding, but what they want is a 5-day vacation. So then now you have to look at the health protocols. I mean, you have rapid testing kits, you have... I'm seeing policies whereby you could have a COVID test pre your arrival, 72 hours. You might be checked at the airport itself, and so there are a number of protocols that you could implement to get back to that kind of visitor model that you had before. But you have the health risk mitigated by these protocols. So it's a long-term thing. I mean, so opening up right now is not going to create this wave of tourism because you have to deal with the COVID matter. But in the long term, I wouldn't even go as far as saying long term.
Medium, short term.
Medium to short term, because I'm sure, Sandra, that in the first part of next year, I think the numbers that you're going to be seeing in terms of visitors is going to be on the rise. Is going to exponentially go up, right? So it's a wait and see, but at the same time, you put in all the measures in place to protect your local population.
Yeah, and again, we have to we have to, raw students can come back now.
Yes.
Opening up, you can have that form of business. Government can have
Right.
that kind of revenue coming in. The supermarkets will be grateful because they contribute heavily to that part of our economy. And so you have those people that you have the investors or people who have an interest in their properties. They can come back and can start to see how they can make certain adjustments and how you can encourage. So I could understand that part. So the reason why I brought that up, because I don't want people have the impression that when the countries open up, tourists are going to come in and the beach bars on the street. But they're doing fine now because you have the locals are patronizing them even more. And they now have an understanding that they don't have to always depend on the foreigners, but they can make their prices attractive for the locals, and that locals can patronize too. And those are the issues. What I like about what COVID has done, it has allowed us to start to think inside the box, not outside the box, but inside of the box. We have to start looking amongst ourselves and see how we can start to, have that circulation of monies in our economy, and government have to start looking at other things. We talk about policies that we have to look to in crisis situations. And we know that we are in a crisis situation. So we have to start looking at long-term and short-term policies that would try to alleviate some of our economical issues that we have. As an economist, what are some of the short-term policies that you would recommend for situations like this? Short-term, medium-term, and long-term policies.
Okay, I'm going to refer to an article here by Tejvan Pettinger. It looks at the crisis and solutions, right? So I'm talking textbook now.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And then we could always move to our local circumstance. This is more like taken from a first world country's perspective. So might have to modify it a bit. Now, so the solutions to economic crisis, right? 1, fiscal policy. When the government influences demand through changing spending or taxes. In bullets, government investment in new infrastructure, example, the New Deal in the 1930s, right? Helps to stimulate demand and create jobs. Income tax cuts, increasing the disposable income of workers, encouraging them to spend. Then there's monetary policy. When central bank influences demand and supply of money. In bullets, cutting interest rates makes borrowing cheaper and should increase the disposable income of firms and households, leading to higher spending. There is on the supply side policies, long-term policies to try and improve productivity and efficiency in the economy. In bullets, free market supply side policies, reducing government intervention in the economy, example, lowering taxes. Then you have interventionist policies, government spending on education and training. And number 4, IMF bailout. IMF gives money to stem the loss of confidence and implement structural adjustment policies, example, better tax collection, privatization, price liberalization. And 5, government bailout of industries and banks to prevent loss of confidence in financial sectors. Now, in our situation, our monetary policy is static and is deliberate. The central bank does not want to influence anything in terms of interest rates, devaluation, additional credit to government. So they allow, their policy is for a stable exchange rate, and that creates low inflation because the inflation, let me go back. Their policy is to make sure to ensure that the economic fundamentals are stable. Inflation stable, you don't have high fluctuations in your exchange rate, and they don't influence too much credit to the governments, because by the the economic union, monetary union, the central bank cannot lend into an appreciable extent to governments. So they try not to influence the economy. All they do is trying to make sure that everything is stable. And then you could grow. So what it falls on, Sandra, is fiscal policy. And so therefore, the infrastructure has to continue. The infrastructure in the economy has to continue. The income tax cuts. You would recognize in the stimulus package, there was a reduction of corporate income tax rate from 33% to 25%, right? Then there was also a reduction in the unincorporated business tax by 50%, from 4% to 2%, right? So that would create, as you could say, leading to more income in the economy. That would lead to more spending. The issue of the structural policies now, structural means long-term. And as you could recognize, there is a move to increase output in the agricultural sector. So that is the side where you look at in terms of productivity and efficiency in the economy, right? Productivity means that you get more out of the agricultural sector. And once you do that, you would recognize that that would create a fall in imports of food. So that would save you. So you don't really have to go out and tax. You could get more improvements in your productivity that would lower the costs of, I wouldn't say lower the cost, but it would allow you to reduce your import bill. Right? So that is a situation. The IMF, their advisors, we don't have to heed to their advice because our economic fundamentals may be that we could manage on our own. That is what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, we're going to have to see what is going to be the fallout of this deficit that is definitely going to be a high deficit in terms of just matching the revenues and expenditures.
You see how a lot of people don't have an understanding of what is going on, huh? The ordinary man doesn't have an understanding of what's going on. They want to make sure at the end of the day, government promises this and government has to stand good to their promises. Yes. Government promised 3 months and they recognize that COVID is still an issue and they want government to extend the subsidizing of one's salary within for extended period of time. And people have to have an understanding that government, just like us, just like the same way we manage our homes, it's the same way the government has to go through the same procedure of managing the country. We are grateful we have not yet gone back to IMF. We just bail ourselves out of, and we can't overlook, and it's not about being political, but we have to recognize the outstanding performance of the government for the fact that the fiscal prudency that have been practiced throughout the past how many years, because of that, why the government was in a position to roll out $120 million stimulus package and could have an extension on, can extend it for an additional 3, how many months that government can do that. But at the end of the day, all good things come to an end. And I can see where now government is starting to pull their hair out because if you're using all of your savings, we're coming to layman's term, if you're always going into your savings and you're not having anything coming in, then that is going to pose a problem. Okay, we have little things coming in because companies have to pay their taxes. But companies are using the COVID-19 as an excuse because government is actually giving themselves their, ways or means in order to be flexible by cutting back and reducing some of the taxes. Reduction of taxes affect government because that's their income. And so that is one of the issues that we're having. And so people now have to, and that's one of the reasons why I have you here, people have to understand that at one point in time, the government would not be in a position to continue. And I'm going to ask the question again. How helpful is the private sector where that is concerned? How much longer can government take on that responsibility of cushioning the sectors that have basically who can't seem to help their workers? I find it's just so unfair that although the companies we have the situation where COVID, companies should have at least been able to give their employees 3 months. 3 months where we can subsidize your salary, even half pay being home, but just basically yanking the rug from under your foot and having government to take on that responsibility. So from an economist point of view, how much longer do you think that we, not from a government, because you don't know what the government spending is like, you don't know where their monies are coming from, but when you look at what is happening, how much longer can government subsidize?
Well, Sandra, before I answer that, let me get to the point you made about the private sector. Now, the government has been engaged in the private sector for some time now. And you would recognize that some of the policies, like the reduction in the taxes, would have been with some sort of dialogue, right? So the chamber, for example, would have been in contact with government and had discussions and seen ways that they could assist. As the stranglehold gets tighter around the neck in terms of this how we're managing our finances, there needs to be more dialogue then. Those concerns you have, if the data supports it, in terms of the private sector taking advantage of it, government would have to try to look at engaging the private sector to say, well, here what? I think you're not being fair to your workers. What is the problem? You have an issue with your expenses too high based on what you're collecting? How can we mitigate that in a better way to make the workers a little bit more secure in their tenures, right? So it has to be a process of engagement based on facts. The private sector has always been sort of appreciative of these steps that government is taking. So to me, it should be more like a teamwork. And I think there have been steps. I mean, they always contribute to the budget process by making their suggestions. But in terms of the welfare of workers, I think government has that responsibility a little bit more in terms of understanding the effect of workers, because government is not using the operation to make any big profit. It's based on making sure that there's growth in the economy and making sure that persons live a healthy life. So all of these things, like spending on education and health and these things, is in support of creating creating a framework where persons could thrive, right? And unleash their talents and issues like that.
And those are government responsibilities.
Those are government responsibilities.
Yeah.
The private sector is a little bit more confined, and I'm going to tell you that private sector looks at profit, right? So you have to try to look at both sides, and it's where the meetings of the minds come in, the private sector and the government. Then you're going to see where things would work out better for everybody, right? Now, coming back to your question of the money part. Now, the government is being continually updated in terms of how the financial situation is the outturn of the financial situation. I'm sure the Ministry of Finance will provide the cabinet with a look at the finances every single month. So there's a constant reviewing of the finances, right? Including information that you were getting from the Inland Revenue, Customs, and all the other collection agencies, in government. So they would be aware of that. Now, I cannot give you an idea of what that financial situation is. And that is why I came back to what I said in the beginning, that at the end of the year, when everything is put together, and then people would see a much more clearer picture. But clearly, Sandra, it's plain to see that the finances are getting very tight. In the beginning, you would have gotten a longer term look at employment benefits, injections in the economy. But as you'd recognize, we have seen some information that there'll be a September payment, but you didn't hear anything in terms of anything past September. So it means that things are getting tight. And so that is why, if you look at the recent article from SKNIS, they're reviewing Social Security is looking at their payment, their benefits payment, and sort of tightening up loopholes.
But they have to.
Right,
because you're talking about people's money that you're playing around with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they're tightening up. So what it seemed to be is more of a targeting to those persons who are really, really, really can't survive. So those who are making a livelihood, you wean them out, and so your targeting comes better in terms of the people that are out there suffering.
And you see how a lot of people are not very honest. People are not looking at the fact that there's some people out there who are really, really suffering. And there's some people who are, they're taking advantage of the situation. Because they hear some people are employed, government is not aware of it, and, because of how some of the employers behave, people can't trace, and so they are getting the stimulus part of the stimulus package, and they're still they're gainfully employed. And these are the things that people have to understand. At one point in time, government would not be able to subsidize anymore, and so every tub has to sit on their own bottom. And it is an unfortunate situation, but we are seeing it, just like you said, it's going to happen because government doesn't have an indefinite amount of funds, and their funding is heavily dependent on what is happening, the areas that have been affected by COVID-19. And so that's one of the reasons why I have here, because we are looking down a very dark tunnel, and we have to understand how I'm anxious to see how the Prime Minister, he's the next person I want to have on my show, who's going to tell you about the where the monies are coming from, how much more money we have, because he has that information. But I'm really anxious, or maybe excited, to see because right now his talents are going to be tested, his intelligence is going to be tested, his areas of being able to manage is going to be efficiently is going to be tested. I'm anxious to see how he's going to handle. He's done a great job, I suppose, understanding that you have to prepare for crisis and situations like this. But I'm really anxious to see what his approach is going to be in the long term. We saw some short term policies that were put in place where he cut back on income taxes. He would have tried to inject some money into the economy to encourage that circulation or that activity. I'm really curious to see where he's going to go from here, because here's testing times.
Right, Sandra, and I wouldn't like to be in his position right now, because it's a very, if I had ears, I'd pull them out.
He doesn't have any ear either. He doesn't have any ear either.
And you can't rely on that to release some stress.
Yeah.
But it has to be a very, 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 as you say, it's the darkness is more than the light.
Yeah.
And for you to find your way out of that.
There's a lot of grouping in there.
Yeah, and that is why, Sandra, as I said before, the leadership that we have now, I think one thing we can rely on is that they have been tested in the past in terms of managing the economy, and you give them full marks for it.
They've done well.
And the surplus that was created, suppose we didn't have that.
Then it would have been in a situation.
Right.
A septic.
Right. So my confidence is with Dr. Harris and his team to find the solution from our to get us out of this darkness. And I believe, Sandra, that the economy was not in a very good shape prior to COVID. So there have been, the machining was just oiled up nicely. This year would have been the bumper tourism season. Everybody had high expectations.
Another millionth customer.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking at now is that how we can get back to that stage in the new COVID normal, right? So that is where great leaders would find that sort of wisdom to move us out. And I have full confidence that the Prime Minister, as the Minister of Finance, and he's supporting ministers along with the technocrats would find a mix of policies that would make sure that our growth gets back to the new normal in terms of moving the economy forward. So, Sandra, I'm not anxious. I'm just waiting for the good news.
I've seen him at work, and
Yes.
he behaves like a magician.
Yes.
We've seen magical things happen. So, I mean, in the short term, they were able to take us back out of the hands of the IMF. They were able to basically repossess some of the lands that were swapped for that. We've seen the reduction in VAT on foods and stuff, and government is still performing, and we hear the songs every time, surplus after surplus after surplus. So we've seen those things happening. We have seen that change, upturn in the economy. We see all the infrastructure developments that are still going on still, although we're still having this situation with the COVID. And I ask myself the question, because when from my own personal standpoint, where I know when I continue to spend, and the money's coming in sooner or later, I would start to, look and to see where I can borrow something from. But we are in a situation now where everybody has to wait again to see how they can find that confidence again to start to lend. Banks are holding on, because if you're not working, you can't go to the bank and ask for monies. I mean, because the bank feel like when you were working, you couldn't pay. Now that you're not working, how would you be able to pay? And we have the hardships, the reality of the hardship, it is real. We can't overlook that. We are going to struggle in the very, very near future. One has to understand that the government can only do this much and no more. People can't always look to government. We have to start to look into us within ourselves, look at the talents coming through. People have to find themselves some form of employment. Yes. Everybody has a talent, and everybody we accustomed, some of us are accustomed to that high standard of living. We have to now realize that the situation, the whole world is in crisis. It is not just St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we have to start looking and making certain adjustments. I've seen a lot of things happening. I've seen a lot of people going into the food industry where they're doing their own deliveries and they're catering from home. These are, you look at what is happening at the in the water sports, the tourism area sectors. People are now catering to the locals and offering their stuff at a lower rate. We have to start looking at the people who, and the landlords have to start looking now that you are catering to locals and not cut back on some of the house rents. That is an issue. So we have to look within ourselves and start looking to government to see how government can bail us out. But we have to start looking and see how we, as citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, can do whatever we can to help with the rebuilding of our country in the post-COVID or the new COVID norm environment that has been created. Howie, time is up for us. I know you have a lot more that you have to say because we haven't gone into yet, but I'm so grateful that you would have given us an idea of the hardships that the government has to deal with, the situation that we are going to be faced with in the very, very, very near future. Well, the future is here, in the now, recognizing that government can only do that much and no more. I wish you would have been able to, we could have looked more on the contribution of the private sector and what we have to do. Small business sectors is what we have to start creating. We have to start looking from a private standpoint, sector standpoint, in opposed to what else government can do, because government at this point in time can't do anything else.
Yes, Andrew, I think that what you have said is absolutely true. And the government does not create money and revenue. It comes from the private sector, big or small, the little shopkeeper, all the ancillary services, food. That is where government gets its taxation from. So we have to make sure that set of people is taken care of in terms of no impediments to their growth, because we need to make sure that they're buoyant and they could manage in a COVID new norm. So it's all up to how those sectors. And as you said, ingenuity of persons to adapt. We need to foster that adaptation. So any policies that could be put in place to get that sector moving again, and we're seeing it. So, but the issue now becomes how we can get the private sector on a whole. I mean, looking at ways that they could protect their workers, because we need the income generated from their payments of their workers. If they cut back too much, it's going to take away from that spending.
Yeah, the
So you-
supermarket's going to have a
Right,
problem. The hair
right.
saloons are going to have a problem.
Right.
It's that domino effect.
Right,
that's gonna
we
create.
have to
Yeah.
keep people employed.
Yeah.
And that's where government comes in, because they have to engage with the private sector and make sure that they keep their persons employed, and anything government could do to assist in terms of keeping that employment up, because without persons employed, nobody going to spend on anything, and the economy is not going to get up.
That's why, the private sector, you have to look at, managers are always highly paid. The ordinary little staff, they're pittance. So you have to look at, and managers have to understand, cut back on some of their salaries, because you don't understand the situation, and see how you can trickle it down and keep people working.
Okay, yes.
Because, it's one set going home with a lot, and the next set is home doing nothing. So they have to start looking within there. Man going home with $25,000 a month, and somebody going home with next to nothing. Give him $20,000, that'll make a big difference, and you can circulate and keep on some people working. We have to start looking now from a worker's standpoint, and how everybody can be getting a little bit of something so that you can carry, because all of us have to have something. We are definitely at the time, I see. Oh, okay, thank you. Well, okay, we'll have been given some extra time, so I think we can definitely look into that. But these are the areas that we have to seriously look into, of how we can create that environment where everybody can get a little piece, because that's what it is, a little bit. All of us are going to be affected in the very, very short run. We are now recognizing it, that government cannot carry that workload anymore, and so we have to see how we can do it as individuals from a private sector standpoint.
Yeah, Sandra, you made a very good point about salaries. From an economic standpoint, the lower to medium income classes, they spend much of their money on expenditure. So therefore, if those persons keep them employed, they would spend in the economy. When you get a little richer, you don't have, like you, Sandra. You don't
shop here, right?
You don't
You
have
shop
to,
outside?
You don't have to spend so much in terms of your income and dispose of it. Savings gets more as you get higher up in the income stature. You tend to save a little bit more. So to keep the workers employed, I think that is what needs to be the focus. Moving on from government running out of that finances to keep that stimulus and that buffer available. So once that is taken, that buffer is taken away, as you said, and you rightly said, the private sector has to take a deep introspection in terms of how they're managing their workforce. And if they're feeling something that maybe government could assist them to get their workforce stable and not try to make too much cuttings and reduce in salaries and all of these things, government can play a part in creating the environment for that to happen. But it has to be an engagement between the private sector and government.
I've looked at some countries and what they're doing. They're looking at their immigration status, and they're looking at the fact that you have to start to control that area too, so that you can encourage that circulation of funding within your country economy. Because people, when you start to have all of these people coming into your countries, then you have an issue, because the monies that are garnered from here, they go up Western Union, and you go. Not that you want to talk along that way, but they're measures that government has to put in place if we are going to survive this COVID-19 crisis that we find ourselves in. We have to look in all of the different areas and see how we can, fully make sure that we keep the money circulating within our economy, in opposed to outside of our economy. You made a statement about the people, middle class, middle income people. They're the ones who tend to keep the economy where it's at. They're the ones who spend locally. When you find yourself in a situation on an upper level, you go on the internet, you import all the stuff, you bring stuff in bulk. I mean, you don't spend within, that circulation of your money is not within the economy. You tend to go outside of the economy. And these are areas that we have to start looking into, of how we can make sure that the small business sector That is another area that government has to start looking into, where you can create that environment, give them some incentives so that that can grow. We've seen that in the 1980s, where the government was heavily dependent on that private sector, the Small Business Association, where you have all these small businesses, because we have a lot of small businesses, but whether or not proper government is these are paying what they're supposed to pay into government. People managing, proper management of those small industries is happening. That is the area government has to start looking at, making sure that inland revenue go and do what they're supposed to do, and making sure that everybody who is collecting on the government behalf is making those payments into government, because that is another area that government, you have to start looking at all those little intricate little crevices where people can fall to those different loopholes. Government has to make sure that that's where it collects its revenue from.
Well, Sandra, I think you were to come over on my side. Because you have said exactly what it needs to be done. I mean, in times like this, you have to tighten. You have to look at anywhere you could find something. And I think that is being done, Sandra. It's being done. Because the management of all those organizations that look at trade and business, those organizations are deep into thought in terms of how they could make the system more efficient.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, I know of the managers in both Inland Revenue and Customs, and at the Ministry of Finance itself, looking at officers who will be engaged in looking at the budgets of various departments, for example, would come together and look at how they could make things a little bit more efficient. So that efficiency move is well in train. But as we go along, as you said, it's more now of implementing things that were maybe there sitting down for a while, get everything implemented. So it's very much a case where it's going to take a whole societal approach.
Yeah.
It's a whole societal approach. You have private sector, government, individuals taking a look at how they could play their part in making sure that the economy grows, because that is what we need, growth, not being stagnated. We don't want to stay back, because as you would recognize, most people saying that we're going back to the 80s. The level of economic activity, the projections are, in terms of what we're seeing in the output of the economy, is taking back us into the 80s. So we have lost two decades of moving forward. So we have gone forward, but now we're going back.
You're retracting. That's right, one of the big problems.
Right.
But government has to definitely start looking at the small business
Yes.
sector. We have to encourage people to start doing their own thing and stop becoming so heavily dependent on government. I think government workload is what you have the STEP program there. You have all these little programs that government try to facilitate. They have to start looking at encouraging.
Yes, Sandra, just to say that as you would look, you would find that there was a new ministry by Akila Byron that's created.
Yeah.
That's entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm sure, knowing how the Prime Minister thinks and his cabinet, they saw a need to create that. And that is not just come ad hoc in terms of just creating that ministry. Mm-hmm. That is to address some of these concerns that what we are saying. That it has to be the focus moving forward. Entrepreneurships, small business, craft, and all of these other
talents that we have hidden here.
Hidden to unleash them.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be required as we move forward in this COVID.
Yeah. Well, Howie, I know we have been given the extra time, and we would have done. It's so much more you want to talk about. But I definitely, as an advisor to Ministry of Finance, you definitely have to start looking at the small business sector, and see how government can basically subsidize, not really subsidize, but how they can give some perks, not perks, that's not the word I'm looking for, but how the government can make funding available, that's the word I'm looking for, funding available that would encourage that kind of growth in the small business economies. That's, a lot of people want to start their own, but that starting up capital it is a problem. So those are the areas I think government has to start looking into about how they can stimulate, not just stimulate the economy, how you can give people that leverage, that flexibility of being able to get that fund, because that is the startup money that people tend to have a problem. With their talents and their, and the information that they have, they can move forward. A lot of people are coming to me, they want to start up, but they don't have the startup fund. Even $5,000, even $10,000, those small amounts for small businesses, so people can become self-sufficient and independent and do not have to depend so much on government, because government ship is behaving like the Christina. We are we are leaning on one side, and government has to seriously start looking about how we can get people financially secured using their own talents, and not not depending so heavily on government.
I agree with you, Sandra, and I wish I'm hoping that will take place in the short term, so we could get out of the situation a little bit faster than before, than that we thought of.
It was a pleasure talking to you,
Yes.
and I am a quick learner. I've learned so much from you, and I do hope that I can have you back again in the very, very short term, because we see and we need the ideas coming forward and people having a good understanding of where we are. We want to cut that panic thing out, because we realize people are acting, people are panicking now, and so they're holding on to their monies because they don't know what is going to happen in the future. I see our economy is not doing as badly as some others, because people are allowed. We are operating like normal. The strip is open, entertainment is happening there. The local people are going there, and that was the area that I had a serious problem with. The hotels now can start to they can create different packages. There are people who are not able to go away anymore. Let us use the hotels here where we can go on a weekend. I am so tired, I just don't have to clean my house, I can eat food at the hotels. They have to create packages that would encourage people to come and have their own staycation here instead of having to travel overseas. And people, that is the flexibility that you want to see happening. For Marriotts can open up their doors again. And we have people open to the Caribbean islands, so people who don't have the COVID issue, and people who can come in and, you can move in and out. Because I think that's the area that you have to look at. People coming out of Anguilla is COVID free. You have to look at some other areas that are COVID free, and we can start to, have people coming in and going out and stuff like that, and see how we can start normal again. Those little things I think we have to start looking into. Health protocols, we have to start to see how we're going to accept some people who don't have, and I'm just saying that I'm not part of that, the NEOC, but those are some of the ideas that they can look into, is having those rigid protocols that goes out to everybody. I think they have to start looking at along the lines that some people are not as affected as some. And so these are the things we have taken up the 15 minutes.
Yes.
Howie, I want to say thanks again, and I am looking forward to having you again on the next program.
Okay, thank you, Sandra, and as usual, it's a pleasure being here, and I hope I've given you some food for thought. Along with that discussion, what came out of it, I think the public would have felt some sort of understanding of where we are now in terms of the COVID-19.
Yep, we are, luckily in comparison to some other people, we are in a good position, but as we can see, we are still going down that dark tunnel looking for that glimmer of light. We do hope that we'll see that more sooner than later. The world is COVID is not going anywhere. Not right now. We hope that everybody would practice that kind of those protocols, and so strict as we are with ours, and see how much farther. Well, we don't have control over that, so let's not go down that path. But thanks for accepting my invitation, and I do hope that I'll have you again. Every time I call you, you always say yes. So in the near future, based on where we are, where the economy is, then I know I need you to come in and start talking about it, because that's what we tend to do. We start to look at where we are, the problems areas, and how we can get people who are going to talk us out of it, and you would have done a great job.
Okay, thank you again, Sandra.
Thanks for coming. It's Friday. It is the end of the week.
Oops.
And people, I think that it is, we in St. Kitts and Nevis, you can still party like you want to party. Practice those social distancing. The bars are open, the strip is open, and you can go out there and you can patronize it. There are things that are happening here in St. Kitts and Nevis that, we're still operating like normal. We're not locked down like some people are locked down. And let's make sure that we continue to practice the mask wearing and the hand sanitizing and the social distancing. So it's Friday. Enjoy the rest of the day, the rest of the weekend, and I do hope that we would make sure that we stay safe. And the weather is beautiful. We are looking forward. I think there's some storms out there that sooner or later we're going to feel some effects. But as it is right now, it's a beautiful day in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I do hope that we continue to enjoy it. My name is Sandra, and it was a pleasure being here, and I look forward to doing the same thing again next week. I want to thank Mr. Bacchus for allowing me the extra 15 minutes. It was 15 minutes well spent, and I don't want to go over. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I stay tuned to WinFM 98.9. It's Voices program. You can call in and you can hear your views and whatever you want to do on Voices program.
Come take a look. More food to eat and cook. More places to see than you read in a book. If you're ready.